City of Charleston is serious about protecting the city from flooding. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I sit down one-on-one with City of Charleston Councilwoman Carol Jackson. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview later on iHeartRadio. Councilwoman Carol Jackson. It's so good to see you again.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Oh, anytime. You're welcome. Well, we've had two blessings over the past couple of months. Really a whole month.
I know.
Hurricane Florence and now Hurricane Michael.
Yes.
How is the City of Charleston doing right now?
Well, I think, the good news is we didn't have the storms that everyone told us to plan for, but at the same time we did all the planning, so I think, it was like having your ongoing annual fire drills, and every time, this was my first time to actually be, in the, I never went down to the MEOC, the Operations Center, but we had nightly council calls in preparing for Florence and going through the roller coaster. Was it not going to get here in its full force? And it's very impressive to see how everyone has a job, gets to the heart of their job, and then we were able to actually bring in people that even though they didn't actually have to do the emergency work, thankfully they were on call, so we had a great relationship with the Convention Visitors Bureau. They gave us, I think it was the Hampton Suites in another location, so that our crews that needed to be 24/7, usually we put them in cots and fire stations and things, so they actually were able to stay right downtown. So that was a great new partnership that the city hadn't gotten before. And I think with our new emergency director, he hit the ground running and really, earned everyone's respect. So yeah, it was as good as it could be for us, and knowing that we're capable and prepared to go through the worst, and thankfully we didn't have to. Personally, it's hard to feel glad on a beautiful morning like this when you see the paper and all the destruction that those poor panhandle residents are, and that could be us, so.
Yeah, thank God we didn't experience that.
Yeah, right.
And just the day before Hurricane Michael came, on Wednesday, city leaders, according to Channel 4, said that they had actually added extra pumps downtown, lowered water levels at Colonial Lake and Lake Darter, and focused on clearing drains and ditches.
Right.
And they also announced new steps to reduce flooding on a long-term basis.
Yes.
And I know the City of Charleston Army Corps of Engineers announced a partnership in the major flooding studies.
Yes, that's huge.
Where do we go from here?
Well, I think, as much as we would all like the magic bullets to, be in our toolkits today, it's still a matter of knowing the plan and then working the plan, and obviously finding the funding to support the plans that we're rapidly making. I guess if I had any encouragement, and I try to say this to anybody that I'm in direct contact with, yes, there was a lot of years where theoretically Charleston knew that we, obviously at the sea level that we were in 1984. The city leaders at that point were studying the opportunities to improve the stormwater systems for the peninsula in particular, but also as the suburbs were starting to be subdivided and filled in. So my territory, was out in James Island, and there was a very comprehensive study that was led by the county during that time, because most of the lands outside the peninsula were still under the control of county.
Right.
But it was cooperative. So the city's name is on the study, and then it was done, specifically for the peninsula too. And we just, it's a very common practice where you get a big study, it costs a ton of money that you don't have control over, and because the water's not at your door, every year it was just sort of an easy thing to defer. That happens in communities all over the country or the world, I'm sure. So I appreciate that citizens that are now seeing the threat of sea level rise to the extent that it is here already, and certainly the climate conditions that are giving us all these major events that weren't even taking place 5 years ago. I appreciate that they want to know why we didn't, do all the things that we could do to get us in better shape for today. Those are really good questions, but it doesn't get us any closer to the good things that we do need to be doing today. So I try to encourage people to say, yes, we're going to learn from what we could have done, finding the funding that needs to come from just a variety of sources. There's no one place. And then get on with it, So we're making strategic priority lists of the things that already have been studied. I mean, if we built all of those storm drain systems and pumping stations in 1984, we'd be at a place where we might have had a lot of the infrastructure already done, so we wouldn't be digging under the streets to the extent that we are now. But frankly, that was 30 years ago, 35 years ago.
Yeah.
So we would have been upgrading all of those and still, behind in terms of what is really the best practices for keeping the city as preventively safe as we can. So I'm part of a new group of elected leaders who want to see the glass half full and the opportunities that people are now actively advocating, and that's the other part of it. I try to encourage my residents and anyone that I come across and wherever I go that we respond to what the priorities are of the people, and we make our own plans, but when we hear from the people, X, Y, and Z is more important, and they're willing to actually put their shoulders to the wheel, and it's going to take some taxpayer sacrifices to get us to the $1 billion estimated comprehensive plans that we know we have on our plate to implement more specifically. We don't even know the extent of all the engineering that really needs to be done, especially out in places like James Island and Johns Island and further out into West Ashley as we're studying the Church Creek Basin. So we've got a lot of engineering study work to do, but it's not just theoretical studies that will go into someone's desk drawer and bookshelf and stay for another 30 years. These will be the kind of targeted studies that come along with the plans to implement immediately after we've done the engineering drainage basin, evaluation. So again, if people haven't really paid attention to the Church Creek, the last year that we've been spending and studying and recommending plans for Church Creek, I send out that ordinance, and actually now there's a full report from the engineering firm that we hired that I think puts the concrete examples out there for anybody to be more familiar with and appreciate. That we knew Church Creek was flooding. That was obvious after the 3 years of beginning in 2015 and ending last year. Knock on wood, it won't ever be that bad again. But those were at our doorstep water flooding that we couldn't handle, and we knew that we had to do something. But the something was an unknown question. So that's when we brought in the combination of consultants, and most of them are stormwater engineers or civil engineers that have to do with the topography and how land, water flows to the lowest level, right? So when we made that huge study, then we took a time out and knew that we didn't want to approve any other development in the areas that we knew were going to be, either the most impacted if new storms came along or would contribute negatively to the existing neighborhoods. So that was an unpopular moratorium for a lot of people, especially in the building industry. But it was a strategic decision that I think the majority of city council and certainly the staff leaders thought was the best thing for us to do. And then during that course of, it was an extended amount of months because it takes a long time to get to the details that we needed to have in hand. So now we have the report that I think is gonna go a long way in informing how we can approve future land development, not only in rest of West Ashley, but also in places like James Island that have never been studied to that extent. James Island is a sea island. It matches Johns Island. If you look on the map, at some point the earth parted and the Stono River was created, but you could squeeze the Stono River and those two islands would go back in, like two pieces of a puzzle fitting together. So they have the same kind of topography, and between those two islands, we know we have at least, and on James Island alone, we know we have at least 10 drainage basins that bring water into a certain place, and that's where we need to keep the water out or protected or well drained off so that it doesn't, collect and flood. And that's all we know. We know from looking at satellite, topography that we've got drainage basins that are a natural element of the way that James Island grew, geographically in over the millions of years it was formed. But we don't know what to do about it holistically. So we need to start studying all of those drainage basins and figure out how they interact and don't, and then come up with studies or plans that would take the best of our current practices. A lot has been done for obvious reasons around the world about how to handle flooding and prevent it. And we're learning, obviously, the mayor took his delegation of our own staff leaders, a couple of consultants, the president of the Historic Charleston Foundation, a couple of our council members paid their own way. So we have a whole delegation now of people who've gone around the Netherlands with the experts that greeted them and took them on this week-long set of touring places and the types of work that the Netherlands has been doing for 500 years. So we have good models to learn from, and over the last 50 years, my understanding is I'm starting to cultivate all the scientists that I can personally, and just in going where they're meeting together. And I've gone to a couple of conferences. I'm going to go to another one at the end of the month in Columbia. So it's like road building, for example. 60 years ago, everybody agreed the best way to manage traffic was to put beltways around urban areas, and then that would transport cars at a higher speed. What those did realistically, Quintin, is create new developments where there'd never been, subdivisions, and then that was like they call urban sprawl, suburban sprawl outside of a core. And now most transportation planners, just to pursue that, analogy, would not ever just say you have a ring, you've got to have the spokes, of the wheel to get people in and out to their arterial neighborhoods, encourage people to live inside the wheel and not on the outside, because that, it's just really hard on the infrastructure if you keep pushing people further out. Okay. So it's the same with water. People have learned a lot over 50 years of studying how to best manage water, and on that basis, we can be encouraged that we're not going to be reinventing anything ourselves. We're going to be learning from the expertise and the best practices in the science that have preceded our own, I call it the pent-up demand of getting on with our plans. So, it's grim. I mean, the climate is continuing to degrade, and will make all of the water get here quicker if the ice caps keep melting. And I think ecologically we have a lot to take on as a global community, but we're going to play our part in Charleston and serve our citizens to the best extent that we can with the smart people that are going to be gathering around us and giving us the game plan. So.
And speaking of serving the citizens, what is it like for you, Carol Jackson, to be their councilwoman?
Yeah, well, it's been a privilege and a pleasure. I like to learn by doing. I'm sure I've said that to you before, because that's sort of my style of. So I don't like to stay at home and read things. I usually go out, where I can listen to people. So I go to a lot of council advisory meetings or neighborhood meetings or places like that where I hear people discussing things from their own point of view, and I try to connect all those dots to the best that I can. And and then I try to be a resource for my own district and for the people that know that I'm at least paying attention and learning. So I try to be responsive. I guess that might be the one overall theme of my first 10 months in office is just to be as responsive as I can. I try not to let 2 days go by without returning a thoughtful email. And and then I try to sort of help people make progress. I mean, the day to day, people just still have the ebb and flow of their own, challenges in living their lives. So when their trash doesn't get picked up, I had an ongoing communication with one of our residents who, very typical of James Island or some of the other St. Andrews district, for example, where people live in a neighborhood where the majority of the trash service is done by, in my case, James Island Public Service District, but this one resident, her house was annexed into the city before she and her husband and children moved there, and so they have the only green trash can on their entire street. And over the years, I think it's been just challenging to make sure that that trash can is picked up when you think about, all the houses that a trash truck needs to go to in any one work day. So I worked back in February to make sure that they call it the flagging, report. So as a trash collection crew comes through a neighborhood, if that property is on their hot button report, they have to call in to their supervisor to say, we just picked up the trash. So at least we know that they were responsive. And so she had not had her trash picked up last week, Thursday, and they were having their kid's big birthday party on Saturday, and they were looking forward to having an empty garbage can to put all the birthday trash, right? So I couldn't get her trash picked up until Monday, but it was one of those things where, there's that, and on any given day, people just forget to do something. But I found our city staff very responsive in the way that they didn't let go of the challenge. I mean, they could have said, sorry, we can't get it till next Thursday, because really they had to send a special collection guy on a pickup on Monday even. But I find those sorts of interactions. I like to serve the citizens, and in the process get to know our city employees, and who I can honestly attest, I haven't had anyone be the typical red tape sort of bureaucrat that stands on the side of not doing their job based on all the regulations that might be a barrier to their making progress for the city. I find everyone goes the extra mile and really probably bends rules. If you had to look at a manual of what they should be doing, they usually do the right thing as opposed to the legal or mandated thing. And that wasn't always true where we came from in the DC part of Northern Virginia. There's a lot of bureaucratic truth to the bad reputations that some government servants have in other locations, but I have put that to the test over and over again here in Charleston. So I really, would like that message to be well heard. I'm going to take on water as my main thrust. When I came into office, I really thought it was going to be housing affordability and our whole traffic, transportation system. Those still all work together, but I'm convinced, and seeing how we've needed to throw up all the resources that we can get into how we're going to deal with our flooding and drainage, challenges, that I want to be as expert as I possibly can as an elected official. Obviously, I'm not going to be a scientist, but I can attach myself to the, to the scholars and the scientists and the academics and the engineers that I think appreciate having that kind of encouragement that people are listening. So that's where I've assigned myself. You can ask my husband. I've got a coffee table full of reports and documents and things like that, and I try to stay up with what's going on and learn. So I'm looking forward to helping my colleagues appreciate that we've got those kinds of responsibilities, and not that they don't now, but they have their own priorities, and so I just decided water was going to be mine. I'm newly appointed to the sort of the reformatted, expanded council advisory committee that is going to work under Mark Wilberg's direction, the Resiliency and Sustainability Advisory Council or Committee. So I'm very pleased about that. I'm honored to be one of the 3 council members that's going to serve on that group, and I plan to do as much as I can to further our goals.
That's so great to hear.
Yeah.
Well, Councilwoman Carol Jackson, thank you so much for your time. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
this.
I appreciate the opportunity. Quintin.
Anytime.
All right.
You're welcome.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.